All right, Matt, and we are back, and we've got a great weekend coming up with MMA all across the board. I mean, you got Contender Series to kick off the week. You've got all sorts of cards during the week. There's been some crazy fights announced lately, but everybody's looking forward to the last card from the UFC Apex before the fights move back over to Fight Island. And Matt, kicking off this card headlined by Colby, Covington, and Tyron Woodley, we have Tyson Nam taking on UFC newcomer Jerome Rivera. And I mean, Matt, Tyson Nam's had a really weird summer after having two hard-fought losses since getting the crack in the UFC. In late 2019, I mean, he fought some really good fighters, the likes of Kai Kara-France and Sergio Pettis. And you look at it, I mean, he was scheduled to face Ryan Benoit back in June. He falls out, and then all of a sudden they bring in 3-1 Zaruk Adeshev. And at this point, Matt, I mean, Tyson Nam has 19 wins, 11 losses, and a draw. Way more experience than Zaruk Adeshev. And it showed. And I know recently Zaruk Adeshev booked into a fight, but it was just one of those weird bits of matchmaking. Then just a week ago, I was going to say weeks ago, it was just a week ago, he's booked to take on Matt Schnell. That was supposed to be a really good fight, but Schnell withdrew in the 11th hour due to complications from the weight cut. So it was tough. Was there going to be a replacement? They couldn't find one on such short a notice. So in steps 10-2 Jerome Rivera. And a lot of fans might be really familiar with Rivera because he appeared on the first episode of the brand new season of Contender Series from this past summer. And I mean, who is he? Because a lot of people, they just might not be familiar with him. And he picked up a nice win over Luis Rodriguez. And it was the one decision that was on that card that just didn't quite impress Dana White. And he wasn't totally on board with signing either fighter. Didn't really agree with the judging in the fight. And ultimately did say, though, that both fighters were certainly talented. And with a little bit more experience, they'd more than likely earn a shot in the UFC. Well, it only took a few weeks, and neither one of them had to take a fight because in steps Jerome Rivera. And with that decision win in tow from August 4th and a 3-fight win streak on the line, he steps in with really nothing to lose and everything to gain. And I mean, with a win over Nam, that would certainly put you kind of over and springboard you, the likes of a win like David Dvorak had against a really tough out in his last fight. And now David Dvorak taking on a really good opponent on this card as well. But I mean, if you look at it and you kind of want a bit of a background, and I've kind of gone on for a bit here, Matt, but Jerome Rivera, I mean, he trains out of the Latrell Yee MMA fitness gym in New Mexico. He cites, you know, his real basis and hero to get into MMA is Diego Sanchez, another one of those New Mexico guys. And I mean, he had those tough back-to-back losses. If you look, you know, even in his last 5, there's 2 at the front and then that 3-fight win streak. He lost to Roberto Sanchez, which ultimately ended up as Sanchez's stepping stone to get into the UFC. He comes right back out, fights Brandon Royval that a lot of people recognize now. He's fighting on the pay-per-view at the end of the month against Kai Kara-France. And he got kind of pushed up. He went to brace his fall as he was going to fall close towards the cage and actually popped his arm totally out. Like it was one of the most grotesque injuries. Don't go watch it, please. But ultimately, I mean, this is a guy, 7 out of 10 wins by submission, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt. But the thing that's nice about him is he's a southpaw. He fights really long, and he has a nice taekwondo stance. He'll throw nice low kicks, kicks to the body, mix in the kick to the head. He does a lot of things very well. So, Matt, my question for you, as I've kind of droned on and set the scene for Jerome Rivera, because we definitely know what to expect out of Tyson Nam now. He's fought top competition, Ali Bagautinov outside of the UFC. Even before that, on the regional scene, Tyson Nam was a pretty big deal. And we've kind of come to know what we're going to get out of him in the UFC. But my question here is, does the style that Jerome Rivera have in any way mirror Matt Schnell's that Nam was supposed to take on last weekend? And yes or no, but the real question is, does he have an opportunity, and should this make for an entertaining fight?
Oh, yeah, this is going to be an entertaining fight no matter what. And it's a lot to ask for Rivera to step up against a guy like Tyson Nam in his UFC debut. Now, again, the setting will be very similar to the setting that he had on the Contender Series, so maybe Octagon Jitters won't play as much.
Similar or the same?
Well, the exact same. I mean, really, there's no change whatsoever. So I do think that just a matter of extra comfort that he will have coming into this fight will make a big difference. The issue is, what Matt Schnell brought to the table is he's a really heavy-handed guy, but the second the fight hits the ground, he can then submit you. And Rivera sort of mirrors that, because when you look through his record and you see his striking style, you would assume, well, oh, he's probably got a bunch of TKO finishes. No, he's much more known as a grappler than as a striker. So the ground game is still going to be an issue for Nam, like it would have been with Schnell. And the good thing for Tyson Nam is, like you had mentioned, he trained for a guy who has a very similar style to the guy he's now going to fight. It's just the guy who he's now going to fight has less power than the previous opponent you were going to be in there with. So I think Tyson Nam, his training camp wouldn't have been that different depending on which opponent it would have been. And that the fact that he's going to be able to come in on basically just an extended training camp, fighting in the same place he's going to anyways. And the Muay Thai of Tyson Nam is going to give Rivera quite a few problems. I think the leg kicks of Nam are going to outdo the leg kicks of Rivera, because when you look at the power that each guy does have on the feet, I don't really think Tyson Nam's this murderous puncher by any means, but you can definitely tell in his fights that when he lands his opponents, there's definitely an effect to them. And 19-11, it's a bit of a salty record, but with 30 pro fights, there's not many things that you haven't seen. And yes, we can talk about not all those fights been in the UFC, but he's been fighting a high level of competition for the majority of his career. And that's why you end up having a record like that. Even though when you look at his skill set, you kind of assume, well, he should be coming into the UFC with like a 15-5 record maybe. But it's just the fact that he fought so many good guys outside of the UFC. Yes, when he came in, he's had some troubles, but I really don't see how Tyson Nam can lose this fight. I think he has a huge advantage on the feet. I think on the ground, or at least his takedown defense is good enough to prevent the fight from getting there in the first place. So I just think it's going to mainly become a kickboxing fight between a really good Muay Thai fighter and a fairly good Taekwondo and sort of that traditional martial arts background that Rivera has. And I just think Tyson Nam's going to be able to pick him apart as the fight goes on. It should be an entertaining one because, Jerome Rivera is going to be there for all 3 rounds. Really tough guy. Good cardio, really good striking. But I just think Tyson Nam, the thing he does best is just a little bit better than what Jerome Rivera does best.
And I mean, Matt, odds makers are giving it to Nam right off the bat. I mean, he opened up a -165. He's sitting at a -160, and the lines fluctuated just a little bit. This fight was just announced in the last couple of days. Jerome Rivera coming in +125. He now sits at a +136, and money continues to trickle in for Tyson Nam. If you look over on Tapology at a 535 votes, 81% going with Nam, overwhelming majority, 63% of those voters picking him to win by knockout or TKO. And I was kind of surprised. Honestly, I was surprised that Jerome Rivera wasn't more of an underdog. And, by all accounts, then Tyson Nam would be a big favorite. And it's one of those ones where we saw what happened when Tyson Nam took on a very short notice and very inexperienced MMA fighter in Zaruk Adashev in his last time. You talked about it. I mean, it's not like Tyson Nam's known as this thunderous puncher, this knockout artist. And a lot of people through his, Tyson Nam's first 2 fights in the UFC thought, okay, this is a volume guy. He's a little bit tentative. We didn't get his all against Kai Kara-France. Well, listen, Kai Kara-France is another one of those guys. He's much younger, but he kind of has a bit of a salty record for a young guy. It's just he has that experience. And now he's fighting on a big pay-per-view, a big opportunity against Brandon Royval. So for Tyson Nam, he had that fight. And before that, Sergio Pettis. I mean, my God, like Sergio Pettis, I hope, will fight Juan Archuleta for the Bellator Bantamweight title next. I don't know, but I hope. So that kind of gives you a bit of a background there. Now, we pumped the tires of Jerome Rivera. We gave you the background, something that you can look back on moving forward. I don't think that this is the fight. I think there's more fights out there for him. I think Tyson Nam's a bit too tough of a test, but I will say this. His takedown abilities are pretty darn good for Jerome Rivera. And like I said, I mean, his striking is very diverse and could cause Tyson Nam some problems. If he's able to establish distance and he's able to move around quite well, Jerome Rivera, there's a path to victory there. I just think Tyson Nam a little bit too much in a UFC debut, but hey, Justin James so far this year, incredible debut against Frank Camacho. Last weekend, we had Kevin Kroom with a really big win over Roosevelt Roberts. So, hey, Jerome Rivera, here's your shot, and I'm really looking forward to this fight, Matt. I'm going with Tyson Nam. You're going with Tyson Nam, and I'm really looking forward to this card. You're not going to want to miss our extended look at our main event between Colby Covington and Tyron Woodley, a fight years in the making. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. And as we always say, let's get into it.